The following presentation is controversial and may be offensive to some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello Forum. Great to have you company again. A lot of things are happening in the world today. In fact, there is a major agenda to change people, to change people's ways they think, and to manipulate people's opinion about what's happening in the world today. This is my video on the bullshit about climate change. You know, there's been a lot of talk just recently about climate change, especially in the news, where Australia have drawn back. They have rescinded the carbon tax and the carbon trading. But we're now seeing the push for blaming human beings for climate change has been accelerating. We're seeing aid agencies now say that, oh, these typhoons that are happening in the Philippines and the bushfires that are happening in Australia, they're all to be blamed on man-made climate change. But the one thing they don't talk about is that typhoons like these, bushfires like these, they've been happening across the planet for thousands of years. They're always big. Some of them bigger than others. Some of them are more devastating than others. But they have been happening long before modern man has actually been moving into these places. So what we're seeing is, by stealth, they're now blaming the people of this planet for the very, very system that has been forced on us. Now, we wouldn't have all this climate change problem. We wouldn't have all these man-made emissions being put into our atmosphere if we had the technology, say, for example, of Nikola Tesla, of Stanley Myers, of some of the more wonderful inventors that have been taken out of the picture, and their technology have been taken out. So we can see now that there's even more of a push in the United States for climate change to be blamed on people, for them to make new laws, new legislations, and of course this evolves into new taxes, higher prices for food for everybody, higher prices for gas. I have with me in the studio here today a very, very good researcher who's been on this. He's got his finger on the pulse of what's happening across the world and in our cosmos. I'd like everybody to welcome Mr. Earthplay. Sir, it's good to have your company here today. And can you tell us just a little bit about what's happening in the United States at the moment with them trying to prepare new laws to change the people, to change the ideas of people? And what are your thoughts specifically about human-created climate change?
Thank you. I'm not feeling great right now. I've been under the weather, but I still follow my research. I don't like the direction that I see our country moving in right now, especially since the presidential executive orders preparing the United States for the impact of climate change. Just like you said, our food prices, our utility prices, well, just about every commodity across the board is being targeted here. Of course, we all know that presidential executive orders are not being on the people, but in an indirect way they actually are. The Department of State, Department of Treasury, Defense, Justice, Interior, Agriculture, the Commerce Department, the Labor Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Urban Development Department, the Department of Transportation, the Department of Energy, the Department of Education, the Department of Veteran Affairs, the Department of Homeland Security, and the list just goes on and on. They're actually, I believe, changing American totalitarian society, and that's very evident by the Obama Health Care or the Health Powers Legislation Act that they crammed down everybody's throat. If you didn't want to open your throat and willingly swallow this crap, they'll ram it right up your ass. It's a very frustrating topic, but that's going to be my comment. I think that this is all leading to a totalitarian society, that it is already in place. And the American people, you know, God help me, are the stupidest people on the planet. I have to tell you. All they're concerned about is Sunday football, basketball, baseball, Dancing with the Stars, what's on television, and who can get stuck than the next guy. I don't see Americans addressing their, or even acknowledging that we have a problem. So I'm very frustrated here.
You know, one of the things I hear a lot about is a continuous barrage in the media of blaming human beings for causing carbon footprints, for causing carbon pollution, for causing all these things. But we happen to be a carbon-based life form. Now, when you start having a tax on carbon, on a carbon-based life form, it seems to me very slightly hypocritical. Now, a lot of this stuff, too, is the system that was forced on us. The system of nuclear power was forced on us. We have no choice in it. The system of polluting the atmosphere with these big companies, the chemical companies, Monsanto, that are poisoning our environment, as was just pointed out. Now, this is not the people who are poisoning the planet. These are the major corporations in pocket with the governments, which I consider are nothing more than just tentacles of the one same octopus that is engaging in depopulation program here on Earth. And one thing I'd like to ask Mr. Earthplay is a lot of talk has been said about humans creating climate change on the planet, but the one thing I never see them talk about is extrasolar activity, things that are happening in our cosmos that are affecting Earth as well. Could you elucidate a bit further about this? Because there is there's a lot of evidence, in fact, that the sun affects our climate, that the things that happen to the sun affect our climate. Why is this not even being brought up in this climate change debate, if you could call it a debate at all?
It's an agenda. As we all know, many of us have been watching the solar indexes and conditions and the data put forward for well over a decade now. I came into it during the peak of solar cycle 23, a very astounding time. But I see that we're now in a solar minimum, and we're dealing with the same phenomena that were occurring during solar maximums. This is because there are other energies from, I believe, from deep background radiation and deep space that are charging up our magnetic field. And it's not a dark star, it's not a dwarf, it's not a rogue body. These things have been happening to the Earth for billions of years. Climatic change. Years ago, if you had asked me this, exclusively blaming the damage done to the planet Earth on man, I would have stood up and faced you down. How dare you? You really need to do some more research. But over the last decade, I think that statement is more true than ever. Not as individual people or citizens driving our cars, living our daily life, but the destructive force of man on our planet, popping methane caverns, oil reserves in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, volcanic, asphaltic volcanic material as well has been compromised, Fukushima, just to name a few, accidental releases of chemicals in India, massive loss of life in the millions every single year due to either man-made or natural events. But I think that the hand of man is starting to be just a little bit more dangerous than the hand of nature. Nature has never struck out and killed an entire ocean. It very possibly could, but man did that. The diseases, the plagues, as you said, the poisoning of our food supply by our very own government and people. That shows you that they are not our people. The pollution of every water source on the planet with iridium-243, I believe, uranium-243, 1,800, maybe up to 1,000 above ground, well, including above ground 1,800 and another 200 underground nuclear detonations. The development of super weapons that will kill every whale, dolphin, mammal, or intelligent mammal in the ocean for a range of 200 miles and cripple them up to 500 miles. Satellite use. I was starting to talk about our water supply, our food supply, our air supply, our soil erosion and chemical content. These are all man-made. We cannot, deny that factor anymore. But is it recklessness on behalf of the human race? I don't think so, because many of these things seem to be purposely by design. They don't care. When they detonated the first nuclear bomb, there was clearly a majority of the scientists that thought that it would start a chain reaction in the atmosphere. But they did it anyway. They did it anyway. And we do so many of these actions. I don't know where it's all going to lead. Inevitably, I think that man is going to wipe himself out. We cannot sustain the level of toxicity, chemical releases, biological and chemical agents, assault upon our civilization or our environment for much longer. Fukushima may, I believe, already be the game changer.
Well, sir, in your humble opinion, is the evidence there to suggest that human beings are actually changing the climate with our everyday actions that we do of driving our car, our SUVs, of consuming as we do? Is the evidence there to say that we are the ones that are changing our climate? Let's put aside the fact that since 1945 up to 1961, that they've let off over 20 nuclear devices in our atmosphere alone and in our stratosphere. So this poisoning of the planet has been going on for over 30, 40, 50 years. And yet suddenly they want to blame all human beings. Is the evidence there to suggest that human beings are alone contributing to this change in climate that we're seeing? What's your thoughts on that, sir?
Well, I wouldn't lay this at the feet of the citizen or the individual. Like I said, driving back and forth to work, maintaining a household, and even building a society. I think that you nailed it right on the head when you said that this was corporate governmental intrusions into our environment and into our lives. They don't care. They simply don't care. But the simple answer is yes, man is responsible because we know the names of the corporations, the entities, the governments that are involved in these massive worldwide disasters. From that perspective, yes, you can lay it squarely on the shoulders of men and women. And I know that you say that it's not you, it's not me, it's not our neighbor that do these things or condone them. These things are done in our name and not necessarily with our consent, but we are aware of them now. We are aware, all of us are aware, and we have been aware for some time. And yet we have still failed to act in any way. Yes, every one of us is a contributing factor, but not to the detriment and the destruction of our planet at that level. When you get into corporate, government, and military applications, people, human beings, are solely responsible for what we find ourselves in this position now.
One of the biggest nails in the coffin of the global warming climate change proponents, one of the biggest nails in their coffin was, of course, the ClimateGate expose that exposed all the inside emails about changing the data, about creating this hockey stick of the Earth's temperatures rising up through the roof. However, there's been more nails in their coffin, considering that half the planet is freezing, considering that most of the time when they talk about the Arctic ice increasing, it actually is increasing. So where is the global warming if the Arctic ice is increasing and getting thicker? What they do not subscribe to is the fact that the planet itself does have its own natural cycles, that the solar system does have its own natural cycles that are interplayed with everything else, and we are also seeing all the planets of our solar system changing and being affected. There's a new red spot on Jupiter. There are massive storms on Saturn. There are things happening all over every single one of the planets. I even read that Venus itself is slowing down. So there's changes to these planets that we've never seen before. And of course, we are at the very start of science opening up these things by observing a lot more that happens to our world. But what can you tell me about these changes that are happening? Surely, driving your SUV in downtown Montana cannot have an effect on the storms that we're seeing on Jupiter. Surely.
Well, I started to briefly touch on some of the conditions in space and the solar activity, but I wanted to address the climate issue first. So I kind of breezed past all that. In our deep solar minimum, I'm not an expert and authority, and I struggle to find information just like most people do. I may have better sources than some people do, but apparently our sun has gone into what physicists are calling a grand solar minimum, while they are expecting a maximum at the same time. It was only 2, 3, 4 weeks ago that NASA predicted that the sun would wildly swing again towards solar maximum, and activity did pick up somewhat, but I believe that that was due to comet activity. The activity in our solar system in the last decade has just been phenomenal. I was always told that it's a vacuum, it's uneventful, not much happens up there, not happen up there actually because it's non-electrical, so on and so forth. But we have all noticed multiple changes in the last decade, if it be due to better scientific instrumentation, more people watching it, maybe a little bit of both. But we have noticed that Venus has slowed in its orbit and become what they call the Ashton Lights, which just means it's a fancy term for it's dragging a tail behind it, like the Earth. It kind of looks like a comet from a distance. We were told in the last 5 years that the core of Jupiter seems to be descending or falling apart or something along those lines. They don't know how long, but they just discovered that. We knew that there were annual storms around the first week of July every year, and this is believed to be outgoing and returning solar currents from the sun, if you're in the electrical universe theory, which I am, which cause large ammonia storms on the surface of Saturn first week of July. Well, here I think it was 2010. It erupted on July the 4th. It not only erupted on schedule, where and when they thought it would happen, but it enveloped the entire planet, or solar body. It's a minor sun, is what Saturn is. So it turned white because of the ammonia storms and stayed that way for quite some time. Know that I track the Earth, Moon, Sun declinations in Julian time, and I noticed that we were losing time to the Sun due to the large earthquakes that we started having between 2004 and 2010. We had fallen almost 8 minutes behind the Sun, and recently we have made up most of that time. They have actually been resetting the atomic clock January the 1st every year for the last 4 years. So yes, conditions in space are changing. I can't tell you exactly what they are. Personally, I feel that this has to do with energy bleeding off of the galactic, the Milky Way galaxy, that ebb out in every direction, 360 degrees. That this is always happening, and like waves in the ocean, some are larger, some are smaller, and now we're able to watch them, and I call them the Ibex wave because of the International Boundary Explorer, the Chandra, the Fermi 2, the High Energy Stereoscopic Survey, and a multitude of these institutions and observatories coming together and laying out one map in one program, trying to define the galactic plane, which they have done so very well. But now they are able to see these waves of energy, and they're in the spectrum of photons, X-rays, microwaves, gammas, radio, the whole spectrum of light. Therefore, you really cannot see them coming in these waves, and some are stronger than others. And I'm under the personal belief, this is not a scientific fact, that our solar system is being affected from outside our solar system by the galactic plane or the Milky Way galaxy energies emanating off. There's no real evidence of large objects or heavy mass objects in the vicinity of our solar system. Look at Jupiter and Saturn would be our first indicator. 17 moons of Jupiter, I believe, 23 in Saturn. plus the 60 plus NASA spacecraft we have out there, and none of them are being disturbed, being caught in gravity welds, being blasted out of their trajectories or orbits by the heavy gravities of these, like a dual binary star circling far beyond our Oort cloud. These things are still speculative, and there are no internal things happening in the solar system that will indicate that something's very close to us, coming close to us, or near to us, or on its way. But one thing that we have noticed is a stream of debris coming through our solar system, what they're calling dirty space. Minute gases, dusts, sands, granules of material, some of them the size of your fist, maybe larger. And the overpresence, I believe, I'm going to call it an overpresence of comets in our solar system in the last decade. I can remember, being interested in astronomy all my life, and maybe 1, 2, 3 comets would come through our solar system, known comets, through our solar system every year. And now we're up there where we have over a dozen of them right now today. More than 12 comets in our solar system, active in our solar system. Comet Ison has returned. It's not in its on its way in, it's on the out, but has erupted a coma as large as the size of Jupiter, and it's still in our solar system. Approximately, what I believe it was 4 to 5 AU behind Jupiter on its way out when it erupted. This is inexplicable, and I've never heard of anything like this. I know that Comet Ison just went behind Mercury yesterday or the day before, and it had been glowing green because of the electrical field in charge through its coma actually turned blue. And the red shifting and all the instrumentation that we get all of a sudden just went completely berserk. They're still working that out. But a lot of changes up there, but there's no one thing that you can point your finger at and say, that's the culprit.
Well, so you're very, very correct in saying that there's a lot more things happening these days, and that is also quite very evident in the amount of fireballs that are coming into our atmosphere, that are falling down to Earth, that we're seeing in the skies. We saw the amazing, the massive meteor that exploded over the Russian town of Chelyabinsk. We are seeing these things more and more often just lately. Do you consider that this is actually a part of what they call this dirty space that you contend with? And also, one further question. Is this kind of research being done by anyone else? I know you've had words with both Mark McCandlish and Professor Jim McCanney. Do they subscribe to this particular type of research, that we are, in fact, seeing a lot more extra galactic matter coming into Earth? Very, very interesting question.
I can't honestly answer that question. And no, I've never had words with Mark McCandlish or James McCanney. We've had discussions. We've never had anything heated. And I think that both gentlemen are on board with the electrical universe theory and the activity in our solar system, but I've never actually directly asked either one of them that question, so I'm not going to presume to answer for them.
Have you yourself ever tracked anything coming into our Earth here, Earthplay? I know a lot of people talk about Elenin and this comet and that comet, the brown dwarf. We were supposed to see Nibiru in 2005. That never was established. Have you ever tracked anything yourself?
No, actually, and I'm ashamed to say that I have not ever tracked anything. The best that I can claim is that I've seen the mountain ridges of the moon. I've seen Mars and Saturn and Jupiter. Very spectacular. Very first time that you see Saturn or Jupiter, you're just beside yourself. The first object that I've ever been able to observe is Comet 2012 S1, known as Ison, from the International Space Optical Network here in New Mexico, where some Russians discovered that comet coming in. I actually got to see it on the morning of the 11th, the 12th from here in New Mexico, low on the horizon at about 4:15 a.m. East-northeast was the first time that I've ever physically, myself, with my own telescope, tracked one of these objects or saw one. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I did that with my binoculars. So that's the first object that I've ever watched come in. And right now we can't see it as it goes around the back of the sun.
Mr. Earthplay, sir, why do you think it is that there's so much bullshit that is purported by the mainstream media whenever the topic of climate change comes up or the topic of global warming pops up? Why do you think there is so much bullshit that is put out by the mainstream media to try and convince these people? You said earlier that there is an agenda, but why is it mainstream media are playing this agenda? Why are they not being objective as reporters and media are supposed to be? Why do you think that is?
Again, I'm going to have to answer this from a personal perspective. The reason that they get away with it is because there's not enough information available to the American people through our own scientific institutions and academia. The kind of news that we get is a blurb in a newspaper or a news broadcast or an internet posting, and you end up having to research dozens and dozens and dozens of unrelated things that you in the search capacity that you're using. Say that you want to find out more about Comet Ison. Well, you can go to NASA and you can go to JPL and you can get an orbital diagram. But other than that, the information is very shortcoming. They're not going to tell you its electrical values, the composition of its nucleus, or the activity of the electrons and protons streaming in and around comets, which clearly define an electrical field. But they just want to push this agenda that it's a nothing, inert little fuzzy snowball. When we know that we've actually gotten up close to Comet Temple 1, took a picture of it, and it was jet black with hydrocarbons all over it. It was black. There was not any ice, any water, anything flying off of this comet. But yet it had a brilliant coma and tail behind it. So I think that the media can simply get away with it because they have a monopoly on all information, and our own scientific and academia institutes are selling us short and not giving us any information, and a lot of speculation and theories and filling in the gaps is done by the public. I know I'm guilty of it myself.
Do you consider this is a broader picture, that there is a global agenda to keep this information from the people and not just in the United States, that in fact the tentacles of this octopus may extend to the Illuminati, controlling the media, controlling our scientific institutions, or whether it be the New World Order, whatever name you want to give them? Do you consider that there's this much influence in our scientific academia today?
Yeah, and I really didn't want to turn in this direction, but let's call it for what it is. It's not the Illuminati, it's the World Jewish Congress. Through them and through the Vatican, dictate all educational, scientific, and medical advancements. They dictate all laws. The Vatican is responsible, owns almost all of our academia. If you look at the bottom of any college page, you'll see that it's funded by the Vatican or institutions very close to the Vatican. They own most of the scientific instrumentation, our satellites, our observatories. Well, let me take that back. Maybe not our satellites. Maybe the American people had paid for them, and somehow the Vatican has gained control of them through the observatories and academia that they already have in place. But absolutely, we're being stifled and kept down under a blanket so that we can't see or breathe, believing that we're free and individual people when we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is all being orchestrated by the World Jewish Congress. And bastards, these bastards, and I'm just going to say it, listening to these people recently, I was talking to an Israeli and listening to some of his, and he said that the only reason there are walls and fences up around Israel is to give people some kind of a definition of where Israel exists, but that Israel actually exists as far as an M16 bullet will reach from that gate or that fence or wall outwards. That they look forward to World War III. They actually tell you this. Israelis, high Israelis from the seat of power, not at the Vatican, about Mount Zion, Jerusalem, and it's a real place. So let's call these people what they are: the World Jewish Congress bastards who have pretty much stifled humanity. They are the first power in known history to have dominated the globe, and they continue to do so. To what end? I believe it will be a World War III, because the mentality of these people are our lands go out and exceed our boundaries as far as an M16 bullet can travel, or a rocket, or a jet plane. That is the boundary of Israel. And they make no pretentious claims about this. They tell you flat ass, they are working towards World War III to purge the world of infidels and anti-Semites.
Well, sir, considering that you do support Palestine, considering that you do support the people to be aware of this, I don't consider you an anti-Semite at all. You mentioned earlier, however, that the Vatican were in control of academia. Does this extend that the Vatican actually have their own observatories? Is that correct? They have their own huge telescopes that they're keeping an eye on the cosmos with? I've heard that before, but can you clarify that for me, sir?
Absolutely. They probably, and this is now an estimate because I did not prepare for this, 90% of all academia and observatories on the planet. They've been able to get into New Mexico, cut all the red tape, and put up another observatory in the Sacramento Mountains in less than 3 years. Now, you can't even build a house in less than 3 years. They own own Arecibo. They own all the biggest and largest telescopes in the world. And most of them now are being built or have been built recently in the southern hemisphere at breakneck speeds for whatever reason. Yes, there is a lot of debris, it would seem, coming in from the southern declination, which is actually our blind spot, coming in directly towards the South Pole. But we're changing that with McMurdo Station, which has been rebuilt because the old one is under snow. But they own all of this. You can go to the bottom page of any observatory or any college, and there'll always be some kind of a Vatican or a sister institution, which leads to the Vatican.
Well, sir, Mr. Earthplay, thank you very much for your time. You've been very, very instructive and very informative, as always. I would like to say thank you very much, and God bless you for your time. Before we finish this interview, sir, can you tell me, do you support the stop funding of Israel? Do you support that, and why?
Absolutely, I do. Only because I believe in the preservation of human life. These are the most foul, decadent, rude, obnoxious people you will ever meet in your life. They belittle, degrade, and diminish anything that they touch or come across. Just from the perspective of self-preservation, my family, my country, I'm going to make a very bold statement here. We need to reevaluate our relationship with Israel and be done with them. And let their fate be their fate. But right now they're guiding the world into oblivion.
Well, sir, Mr. Earthplay, on behalf of Stop Funding Israel and all the people listening in here today, I'd like to thank you and say God bless, take care, and ciao for now.